The afternoon rain had stopped just before the funeral began. Claire Morgan stood near the back of the small stone chapel, her 3-month-old daughter Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. She wore a white lace dress, the only nice thing she owned. It had been her wedding dress just 14 months ago. Her husband, David, had been only 32 when the accident took him. A good man, a kind man, but his family had never accepted Claire. She was a waitress from the wrong side of town. Too young, they said. Not their kind of people. Now, as the service ended and people filed out into the cemetery, Claire felt the weight of their stares. David's mother, Patricia, approached with tight lips and cold eyes. "You need to leave," Patricia said quietly but firmly. "You don't belong here." Claire's throat tightened. "I'm his wife. Emma is his daughter." "That's debatable." Patricia's voice grew louder. "David's lawyer will be contacting you about the estate. But today, you're not welcome at my son's graveside." Claire felt her legs trembling. She looked around at the gathered mourners. David's colleagues, his childhood friends, distant relatives. No one met her eyes. No one stepped forward. "Please," Claire whispered. "Let me say goodbye to him. You've had your moment. Now go." Patricia gestured to 2 men in dark suits, David's cousins. They moved toward Claire, not quite touching her, but herding her away from the crowd, back toward the dirt path that led to the parking area. That's when Claire stumbled. Her legs, already weak with grief and exhaustion, simply gave out. She collapsed onto the red clay path, instinctively curling her body around Emma to protect her. The baby began to cry. Claire's knees scraped against the rough ground. Her white dress was smeared with reddish dirt. She felt the hot shame of humiliation mixing with her grief, and tears began streaming down her face. Through her blurred vision, she saw a pair of polished black shoes stop beside her. Then a man's voice, deep and calm. "That's enough." Claire looked up. The man was perhaps in his early 40s, tall and dignified in a dark suit. His hair was neatly combed, his beard well trimmed. But it was his eyes that struck her. They were kind. He knelt down beside her on the dirt path, heedless of his expensive suit. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. I'm fine," Claire managed, though she clearly wasn't. The man stood and turned to face Patricia Morgan and the gathered crowd. When he spoke, his voice carried authority. "My name is James Whitmore. I was David Morgan's client and, over time, his friend. We met several times a month for the past 2 years. He paused, letting his words settle. David spoke about his wife constantly, about how she made him laugh, about her kindness, about how excited he was to become a father. Patricia's face had gone pale. "Mr. Whitmore, this is a family matter." "Is it?" James's tone remained calm but firm, because what I just witnessed was a young widow and her infant child being cast out at her husband's funeral. That's not family, that's cruelty. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Claire could hear the wind rustling through the old oak trees that lined the cemetery. James turned back to Claire and gently helped her to her feet. Emma had quieted, sensing the change in atmosphere. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and carefully wiped the dirt from Claire's hands. "Come with me," he said softly. "Let me take you away from here." "I can't," Claire whispered. "My car. We'll arrange for it to be brought to you later. Right now, you and your daughter need peace and dignity." He looked at her with such genuine concern that Claire felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. But these were different. Someone finally saw her. Someone finally cared. James led her to the black Rolls-Royce parked along the path. He opened the rear door and helped her settle in with Emma. The interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. It felt like stepping into another world. As the car pulled away, Claire looked back one last time at the gathering. Patricia stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and anger. But Claire didn't feel triumphant. She just felt tired. So very tired. The drive was quiet. James sat beside her, giving her space but remaining present. Emma dozed in her arms, her tiny fingers curled into a fist. "Where are we going?" Claire finally asked. "There's a small cafe. I know. Quiet, private. I thought you might want somewhere to collect yourself. If you'd rather go home, just say the word." Claire thought about her tiny apartment. About going back to the empty rooms she'd shared with David, about trying to... Figure out how to survive alone, with a baby and no savings. The cafe sounds nice, she said quietly. The place James brought her to was tucked away on a tree-lined street. Inside, it was warm and softly lit, with comfortable chairs and the gentle hum of quiet conversation. James ordered her tea and brought a small plate of sandwiches, though Claire wasn't sure she could eat. "David used to tell me about your dreams," James said after a while. "He said you wanted to open a bookshop someday. A place with a cafe attached, somewhere people could gather and feel welcome." Claire smiled sadly. "That was a long time ago, before reality set in." "Reality changes," James said thoughtfully. "But dreams, good dreams born from good hearts, they have a way of coming back around, if we let them." They sat together for over an hour. James didn't push her to talk, but when she did, he listened. Really listened. She told him about meeting David at the diner where she worked, about their simple wedding with no guests from his side, about the joy of Emma's birth and David's face when he first held his daughter. "He loved you both very much," James said. That was clear to anyone who knew him. "I'm sorry his family couldn't see it." As the afternoon light began to fade, James drove Claire home. When they pulled up to her apartment building, he reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. "If you need anything, legal help, financial advice, or just someone to talk to, please call." "And I mean that, Claire. David was a good friend to me when I needed one. Let me be that for you now." Claire took the card with trembling fingers. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." James smiled gently. "I know enough. I know you love David. I know you're trying to be a good mother. I know you were treated shamefully today, and you deserve better." He paused. "And maybe, in some small way, this is my chance to pass forward the kindness that was shown to me once, when I needed it most." 3 days later, Claire's phone rang. It was James's lawyer. "There were papers to sign," he said. "Documents regarding David's estate." When Claire arrived at the office, prepared for the worst, she was stunned to learn that David had taken out a substantial life insurance policy just after Emma was born. Patricia had tried to contest it, but the documents were ironclad. More than that, James had made some calls. There was a small storefront available for rent, just 2 blocks from the cafe where they'd talked. The owner was willing to work with her on terms. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Claire stood in that empty storefront a week later, Emma strapped to her chest, and she could see it. Not as it was, but as it could be. Bookshelves along the walls, a small counter in the corner for coffee and tea, comfortable chairs where people could sit and read and feel welcome. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "How does it look?" She smiled through her tears and typed back, like a dream coming true. "That was 8 years ago. Today, Morgan's Books and Brew is a beloved fixture in the neighborhood. Emma, now 8 years old, does her homework at the corner table after school. Regular customers know them both by name. And once a month, like clockwork, James Whitmore stops by for coffee and conversation. He never asked for thanks, never expected recognition. But Claire made sure that on the wall behind the counter there's a small plaque. It reads, "In memory of David Morgan, who taught us about love, and in gratitude to James Whitmore, who taught us about kindness." Sometimes Claire thinks back to that terrible day in the cemetery. The humiliation, the grief, the fear, but mostly, she remembers the moment when someone knelt beside her in the dirt and offered his hand, because that's when she learned the most important lesson of all, that in our darkest moments, the smallest act of human kindness can change everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, a stranger becomes the family we needed all along.